welcome again to everyone, and I'm going to kick off by asking Cleme, who is co-facilitating with me, to introduce herself first. So Cleme, would you like to just say a few words and say hi to everyone?
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, hi everyone. Really excited for this session. I can see one or two of my colleagues on here as well, so hi, Samir at least. It's been really good getting to work with Amanda and Tina on this session. I hope it's really useful for everyone. Yeah, there you go, Tina.
Great, thank you, Cleme. And then Amanda Potter as well, who very kindly agreed. So to put a bit of context in place, Cleme and I were having a chat about how, as part of the Emerging Occupational Psychologist mentoring scheme, it'd be nice for us to work together on running a session. And we thought, well, what could the topic be? And for us, the whole hybrid working thing that is about to start happening and has already was something that was really pertinent, and we thought also really interesting, in particular in relation to psychological safety. So as we were talking, I was thinking, I think I know someone who knows quite a lot about psychological safety, and that is Dr. Amanda Potter, because she has developed a rather wonderful tool called Psychological Safety Questionnaire. And I was trained in that at February this year, and have used it quite a few times to really good effect. And so we were delighted when she said she was happy to be our subject matter expert on this session. So I'm now going to hand over to Amanda, and Amanda is then going to go forward and we will have the session together. So enjoy, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tina. Thank you very much. And hi, everybody. And hi to those of you who know me and have already been on our psychological safety sessions in the past. I hope we've got some new content that's going to intrigue and interest you. So firstly, a little bit about who I am, but a very small bit, I promise, which is to say I'm the CEO of Zircon and the CEO of B-Talent, two organisations that we merged last year. Zircon is consulting, B-Talent is product and platform. And ultimately, I'm a psychologist, but a researcher. So I find topics that I'm interested in that might be topical and useful for our clients, and I go out to try and understand it. And then very often we end up building a product on the back of it. And that's how we came about psychological safety. So what I'd like to do today is take you through some of the theory and some of the research. We're going to have some interactive sessions, as Tina said. So there's going to be 3 breakout rooms sessions where you have the opportunity to network and to meet some of your colleagues. They won't be recorded, but we will be recording this session in case people want to access it later. And because it's about my psychological safety and yours, and also about networking, I know many of you have gone camera off, but I am going to encourage you, if you're comfortable, to be camera on. And that's because it's about creating trust. We're going to be talking about some really quite complex and sensitive issues today. And so having camera on helps me with my mental health, because I'm not just staring at words on black font all the time. And also it's just lovely to see different people, and you'll get to see each other and meet each other. So let's just start by doing one thing, which is actually, could everybody turn their camera on for the moment? Unless, of course, there's a reason not to. There's a real confidential reason not to. Thank you. You're all doing it. It's lovely to see your faces. Hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you. Hi, Tamara. And I'm getting waves and claps and things as well. How fabulous. Hi, Claire. So welcome. So hopefully I've made you welcome. Now you've got your camera on. Imagine I told you the following. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to turn your camera off if this challenges you in any way. Imagine I told you could only stay for this session if you had a PhD. If you'd published a book or blogs, you're at least 25 years old to be rational and logical enough, or you're a parent in order to really truly understand empathy and compassion. So if any of those of you challenge you in any way, you think that you might be excluded by any of those statements, could you turn your camera off now? And what we're doing is we're showing you that these suggestions might be impacting your psychological safety, because indeed they're actually silly statements or ridiculous statements for the concept of this study or for this exercise. You don't need to have a PhD to be here today. You don't need to have published a book. It might be helpful to be 25 or more because our prefrontal cortex has developed by that age. And it might be helpful to be a parent, but it's certainly not a requirement. But even though those statements might not be rational, if I suggest them to you, if you had any flicker of doubt or question inside yourself, what it did is it challenged your sense of psychological safety. So those of you who are comfortable, if you wouldn't mind going back to camera on, I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much. That did prove a point. So many of you turned the camera off in that moment. What happens when we're feeling threatened is the amygdala, which is the core part of the brain, it's the stem of the brain. It responds very quickly and sends signals to the adrenal gland to produce the stress hormone cortisol and to produce epinephrine so that we can have a fight or flight response. When we're feeling stressed or anxious or threatened and we're not feeling safe, the amygdala is in high alert. It's constantly scanning the environment, checking for those threats. The prefrontal cortex develops when we're 25, hence the statement on the previous slide. And what happens with the prefrontal cortex is it's slower, it's more laborious, and it takes a longer time to develop. So when we're feeling anxious and stressed, the amygdala physically grows in size. It becomes stronger and faster. And so when we're feeling threatened, when we're not feeling safe, we're on high alert. And we're constantly in that sense of, I need to get into fight or flight response. But the truth is 99.9% of the information that is processed by the brain and therefore processed by the amygdala is subconscious. So most of the time we don't even recognize or attend to those threats. So it might be a threat, it might be an emotive comment that Terence said to me, who's a long-term client and friend, but I think, oh, maybe Terence isn't very happy with me now. And then every time Terence says something to me, I'll be thinking, see, I thought Terence wasn't very happy with me, but I might not have actually spoken to him to confirm whether that is true or not. And that's because we have this thing called a negativity bias. We naturally focus on the negative information because it's about protecting ourselves. So we want to actively focus on that negative information in order to protect ourselves and the people that matter to us. But in truth, we need to have more balance. So I've given you a little bit of information about psychological safety. I'd like now to give you the opportunity to say hello to each other. So if you wouldn't mind using the chat function, please, and just say hi to everyone, just say who you are and where you're from. And Clemme's just going to highlight a few for us so we can just see where you're all from and why you might be here today.
Thanks, Amanda. I can already see from some people with their cameras on, actually, like Amanda, it looks like you're somewhere quite sunny. There's no way that can be England.
I'm in England.
Oh, not you. There's another Amanda on here.
I was there. I was going to say, which Amanda's that? Oh, look, there's Amanda.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, that Amanda's not in England. I say, I'm in Surrey.
No worries. We've got someone from Oxford, not too far from me, currently in the Lake District. Very nice. Good old staycation. Clinical psychologist in West Sussex. Hi, Claire. Bridgewater, York, UK. We've got quite a lot of mental health practitioners here. I'm sure this would be quite applicable for you and quite interesting. I'd be interested to hear your points of view on some of the stuff that we would be discussing today. South African living in London. Hi to you, Nicola. Your dissertation is on psychological safety. Very good. Hopefully we can give you some nuggets of wisdom here then. In Wimbledon, Claire, very nice. Excellent. Cool, really nice to meet everyone. I'm going to hand back to Amanda.
Thank you, Cleme. Thank you, and lovely to meet you all. Thank you. And the reason that's so important is you're going to be going into some group exercises and spending time with each other rather than with us over the course of this session so that you get to build some relationships and create new networks. So thank you. So let's just really start by looking at what is it then? What is psychological safety? We'll look at why it's important, and we will be having a series of exercises, so we promise it will be facilitative and interactive. And in fact, we're going to go straight into our first exercise, which is based on personal connection. So the real core element to psychological safety is that you can create trust, and you create trust by getting to know people at a human level, that you really get to know people properly rather than on the professional level. And so to do this exercise, we're going to ask you to go into groups of 4 or 5, which are going to be sorted for you. And we're going to ask you to each take it in turn to answer this question. If you knew me well, or if you knew me, you'd know that. And I'd like you each to take it in turns to share something about yourself in those groups, so you start to build those relationships. So Tina, it's only going to be 5 minutes, and Tina's going to put you into your groups. So I hope you're enjoying. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to join one of the groups. Thank you. I'm now going to share my screen, and hopefully you can see it. Good, thank you. So let's look at what psychological safety is. So the first thing to say, it's a climate, not a culture. And we will have a slide on climate versus culture next. So it's a feeling, it's a sense of safety in the team or in the environment. It's not a culture, so it's not about rules or regulations. It's not about a belief or a personality. And Amy Edmondson, who is really the godmother of psychological safety, and I've listened to many podcasts by her, I've read her books, read many of her blogs and articles, and other authors too. They all talk about interpersonal risk and candor. The thing I quite like about this topic, which is quite different from personality, is that everybody agrees. Everybody agrees what psychological safety is and why it's important. And they also agree that it's really hard to find, that it's very rare for you to find a psychologically safe organization. So Amy Edmondson, when she was interviewed, was asked, which organizations do you work with that are psychologically safe? And she really struggles to answer the question. She talks about Pixar, about Google, and about Salesforce.com being 3 organizations that are working well towards being psychologically safe. But the truth is, it's in pockets, and very much it's down to the leader of that team to create that sense of safety. The benefits of psychological safety are, there are multiple. So it's about learning, innovation, problem solving, error reporting, and well-being, of course. But very importantly, there is a strong link between resilience and coping and well-being and psychological safety. And we found a statistical significant relationship. And what's really good about the approach to psychological safety is it impacts the way an employee feels about the team or the organization in which they work. And I'm going to give you a moment to read this slide because it looks at the difference between culture and climate. We know from research that organizations try to articulate their aspired culture through their values on their website, but often the truth of what it's like to work in an organization can be fundamentally different. The climate that someone experiences within an organization can change from team to team. And that truly is due to the makeup of that team and due to the leader. We have to remember that psychological safety is not about being nice, about being complacent, or saying what we think other people want us to say. It's not an intelligence, it's not a belief, nor is it a personality. It's truly about the experience that we have within an organization. Research has shown the relationship between psychological safety and low levels of neuroticism, so emotional stability of leaders. And we have proven a relationship between strengths-based cognitive diversity and also resilience and psychological safety. So I'd like to now hand over to Tina and to Cleme. So I'm going to come to Cleme first, because I'd like for you to talk about an experience of when you have either felt safe or unsafe at work.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So I actually had a mentoring session with Tina, and we were trying to work out what this session should be about. And she was telling me that she'd done a session on psychological safety recently. And I'd been thinking, obviously, kind of how we all are at the moment, about how hybrid working works. And I'd actually just come off a meeting with a couple of colleagues. So there was me in the room with two of my peers, and two of our leaders were there, but they were there virtually. And it got me kind of thinking about how we were creating a psychologically safe environment for everyone, whether they were in the room or not in the room. So there are a few times where, for example, we were at the water cooler having discussions before we went into the meeting, and we realized that actually we'd kind of prepped what we were going to say before that meeting, and the leaders in the room who weren't quite in the room didn't have that opportunity to engage in that conversation. Then we also realized that sometimes we were telling jokes and whispering to each other, and the people who were on the screen had no idea what we were doing. And it felt slightly uncomfortable. It was very strange. There was just a feeling that not everyone felt safe in that environment, in that meeting. And I think we probably would have felt safer if we were all virtual. So I kind of ended up discussing that with Tina and talking about what the impact of that might be and how to kind of overcome that when all of us are going to be working in that sort of way for a long time, for a while. And this is when we decided to run this session, because actually I don't have a definitive answer to that question. It's more, this is kind of why we wanted to run this session, is to understand from everyone what might we want to do to make sure we're creating that psychologically safe environment for people, whether they're working virtually or working in the office. Tina, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cleme. And I also don't have the answer. I think I'm gradually trying to get closer to some answers and how you might be able to deal with it. And we're also really keen later on in this session to get ideas from all of you. But in terms of my experience of working environments, so I've been working now as a business psychologist and executive coach for, oh my goodness, 30 years, so quite a long time. And as I'm sure you'll appreciate, in the kind of work I do, I've been working as a consultant my whole life, and I love to talk rather than to write. So not surprisingly, most of my work pre-COVID was face-to-face, whether I was doing one-to-one coaching or facilitating different programs with leaders, with high potentials, with teams, all of that. And I love it, or I loved it. Then when March last year happened and we suddenly all had to go virtual, that was quite a shock to the system, I must admit. But I've got into it now. I actually quite like Zoom, and it's working, and it seems to be pretty good. But now we're moving into this whole hybrid way of working. And I was delighted that last week I was asked to propose for some work that is going to be properly face-to-face, because I've done a couple of bits of coaching since the whole pandemic started, face-to-face, but that's been it. Everything else virtual. So that sounded great. And I thought, okay, this is really good. But then I discovered that 6 of the 8 people involved are based in the UK and would be going to the London office, whereas 2 are based in Singapore and wouldn't be flying over for the session. So clearly I've got to do lots of thinking about how I can ensure that they all feel really psychologically safe and not excluded. And then yesterday, I think it was quite opportune, really. I had a bit of a near miss where I thought I was completely organized. I had 10 people coming in from Houston, New York, from Toronto, and from London. Now, everyone else, apart from the guys in London, were coming in individually. And in fact, one of the 4 people in London was also coming in individually from her own home and her workspace at home. But the 3 who were in the London office, not surprisingly, thought, oh, well, of course, we'll go into a meeting room together. But fortunately, this happened sooner rather than later, and they were resourceful enough to go and find different rooms, and there were enough rooms. Pre-COVID, the meeting rooms wouldn't have been available, I'm sure, knowing this organisation. So we were then able to all be coming in individually. But, you know, I had all my breakout rooms sorted and it would have just thrown it apart. So I'm hoping sharing that example will mean that any future sessions you're doing, even if you don't think they're going to be hybrid, if you also facilitate group sessions, that you'll be learning from what could have been a major mistake from me as well. And it did work out really well. So I just thought I'd share that. So we're really keen now to hear from you, and we're going to put you into breakout rooms again. And this time we are going to give you 10 minutes to have a proper discussion. So you'll be with different people, so you'll get to meet some other people on this call. And the topic of discussion is, what extra challenges do you think hybrid working will have on levels of psychological safety? And we're anticipating you're all going to be having different experiences and so on. So it'd be really nice then to have this opportunity to discuss and share what the challenges you think may be. So if you do want to take a pick of the question, or if you can keep it up there, that's great too. And then Cleme is setting you up, so you'll be going off into your breakout rooms again. So enjoy your time discussing.
Thank you.
Cheers. Record, Amanda. Perfect, thank you. So welcome back, everyone. We really hope you had a useful discussion in your breakout rooms, and Cleme has set it up so that we can gather some thoughts that have come out of it using Mentimeter. So I'm going to hand over to Cleme to explain how we're going to do that.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, you can see I've just popped a link in the chat box. You can either go to that link or you can go to www.menti.com and I can give you a code to put in a second, but I'm just going to share my screen now. And we just want to hear back from some of you. So if you just answer that question based on the discussions you just had, what extra challenges do you think hybrid working will have on levels of psychological safety? Yep, so we've got answers starting to come in. Perception of fairness. Whoever put that, do you want to come off mute and tell me a little bit more about that one?
Hello, that was me. I've been mediating a lot of situations where experiences have been different. Throughout lockdown and coming back, people have had better or worse times, I think. So life is unfair, or people's experience is unfair. So in terms of that psychological space, that perception of a lack of a level playing field, people are taking that back into the workplace when they're coming in. And also connected to that, Cleme, if I may, the perceptions of how bought in and dedicated and kind of committed to the company or working you are, if you're willing to come in and kind of almost not give up or sacrifice a little bit of the comfort of being working from home. So there's, yeah, the kind of two bits there to that, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, Joanna. I hadn't considered that. I can see how people might perceive it that way, but it's interesting, I guess. Some people are in a time in their lives where it's kind of much more convenient to be at home, and some people actually to go in the office, you kind of need that level of comfort and affirmation with people. So yeah, 100%. I hadn't really thought about that, but that's really good. Just reading through the other comments, there's quite a few now. Building trust remotely after such a focus on working in close proximity. Yeah, water cooler conversations. There's a great one in here about non-verbal communication, body versus faces. Does someone want to pop themselves off mute and talk a little bit about that one? Don't be shy, it's a psychologically safe environment.
Sorry, just struggling with mute there. Hi.
Go on,
Hi.
Claire.
So I'm a clinical psychologist, but I was just thinking really about how important it is to be able to read the whole body in terms of understanding the tone of someone's experience and their communication and where they're at with their well-being, and actually that you would be getting very different information and feedback from those on, say, a group camera in a meeting room versus those being seen face to face, and being in tune with the differences in feedback that you're obtaining from that, and whether there were, you know, having individual cameras, for example, for those who are in the workspace may give more of an even playing field with that information, and how hard it is without that non-verbal communication and sense of whole self to pick up information about things like energy in the room, and how to adapt that and work with the flow of people, and you're going to get very different feedback from those on camera versus those in the room to be able to do that. So just being in tune with that, really.
Absolutely. What a great answer. I couldn't have said it better myself. Amanda, you've just popped yourself off mute. Do you have something to add?
I was just thinking that there's a few around cliques as well. I think we were talking in our little breakout group about the fact that there's offline conversations that might be happening via the chat, or you can see people are texting, or and so that can create a sense of I'm not being included. People are talking about me, or you just don't know. And so normally you could pick up on this stuff when you're face to face, and so that concept of cliques, we know from school it's not very nice, and we certainly don't want that in the workplace, so we need to actively work against it. So I think these comments are great. We will be capturing it, and thank you everyone for contributing, because your comments are incredibly valuable. Thank you, Cleme. Are you happy to stop sharing, and then I will share again?
Yep.
Brilliant. So if I could just share my screen once Cleme's done.
Yeah, if you just start sharing, it should just take over.
Brilliant. I've been bossy. Thank you.
Excellent.
Great. So hopefully you can see my slide. Cleme, can you confirm?
Yep.
Great. I wanted to introduce to you our research model of psychological safety. I mentioned earlier that the thing that makes me feel good and fuzzy on the inside is the fact that the research that I've done into psychological safety has been pretty consistent in terms of the researchers. They're all talking about interpersonal risk. They're predominantly talking about people who feel safe are more likely to ask questions, to challenge, to question, and so on. And we also know that it's a climate, not a culture. However, what we have found through our research is many of them have kind of ladder approach, where you have to achieve something else in order to be safe. But our research has identified that pretty much every environment that you go into, every climate that you walk into, could feel different. And that could be because of different aspects. So we've identified 10 aspects of psychological safety. The teams that are safe are on the left. So teams that are safe speak up and share ideas. They are personally connected, which we've talked about. They're courageous, so they don't just say what they think people want to hear. They embrace diversity, so they encourage people to be different. They include people, so everyone has an equal voice. And we were talking in our room about the research on the size of meetings and the fact the larger the meeting, the fewer people speak. So if 4 people are in a room, 2 people speak 62% of the time. 6 people in a room, 3 people speak about 70% of the time. 8 people in the room, 4 people speak over 80% of the time. So the larger the meeting, the fewer the people contribute, which doesn't create safety. And actually what we want is cognitive diversity. We want everyone to challenge each other. So safe teams learn from mistakes. They actively talk about lessons learned. They create purpose, so they know what they're doing, why they're there. They're honest to themselves, with themselves and each other. They show appreciation, so they are grateful for the contribution of their colleagues, even if it's different to what they believe, and they create trust. On the other side, some of these aspects of unsafe teams might appear good because they focus on consensus, they seek consistency, they're nice, they want to please. but actually these undermine psychological safety. And so teams that are not safe are consensus driven. They try to look for similarity rather than difference. They focus on business first without getting to know each other, which impacts trust. They want to please, so they say what they think other people might want to hear. They look for threads of consistency rather than threads of difference, and they hire for consistency rather than difference. They defer up the chain of command. They avoid failure, so they move rapidly away from failure, and they don't understand why, and they don't admit mistakes, which is how Amy Edmondson's research started in this space. They lack clarity and purpose. They might have too much complexity or too much volume. They're nice all the time. So we see lots of nice cultures, which are really, it's a nice culture covering up what's going on with the climate. They're relentless, always expecting more of each other and themselves, and cautious to trust. And if you were to ask me which the three are which are most critical for psychologically safe teams, which we've been working with many teams now over the last year in this space, because it's still quite a new piece of research for us and our product, I would say that trust, being personally connected, and purpose are the foundation for psychological safety. Now, this is assessed through our card sort exercise or through our online questionnaire. And because we didn't ask you to complete the questionnaire before today, we're actually going to do the card sort in a virtual format. So Tina and I are going to take you through that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through each of the different aspects of psychological safety, and we're going to pretend we've got the cards in front of us. And I'm actually going to ask you to go through this exercise thinking about the team that you currently work in. Now, some of you might be independent, so you might want to think about a personal team, or it could be the team that you used to work with, or a network, a sports team or a network. And Tina and I are going to take it in turns to explain them. So what I'd like you to do is to think about that team and to think about whether the team and the climate of that team is more consensus driven, or whether you speak up and share ideas. So a team that is consensus driven seeks compromise and consensus. Their focus is about agreement, and what they're trying to do is to consolidate and come to a single way forward. So they don't disagree, they prefer harmony. Whereas teams that speak up and share ideas, they openly disagree, they believe no idea is a silly idea, and they encourage out-of-the-box thinking. So the team that you're thinking about, were they more likely to be consensus driven, or were they more likely to speak up? So write down consensus or speaking up. And if it was very consensus driven, allocate a 1. If it's very much about speaking up, you give it a 10. And the reason for the number is the severity, so we can see which ones are the strengths and risks for that team. And so I've done the first pair. I'm now going to pass over to Tina to do the second pair.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so you can see on the screen now, we're looking at the end of where, top end, of course, personally connected, the other end, the professionally focused. So if you're starting at that sort of that further end, the risk end, it's really thinking about when teams are much more into ensuring that they're connected on a professional basis, where they don't really like to talk about, you know, what they did at the weekend and things like that. That's not to do with work. So it's very much focusing on the task at hand, not bothering so much about making those individual connections there. Whereas clearly what's so much better, and if you're thinking about your teams, then you have more of the personal connected going on. This is where it's recognized that it is so important to invest that time. And particularly, I think, if you think in a hybrid working environment as well, so investing that time to really connect with people on a personal level. And this links directly with that exercise we did right at the beginning, that if you knew me, you'd know that exercise. And it's where you've got much more empathy in the team, where there's more emotional intelligence, where, you know, they are really prioritizing that as being a key thing. So again, like Amanda said, go from 1 to 10 and rate the team that you're in. Where on that scale would you place your team? And then we'll move on to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you. And as you can tell, Tina and I have got a lot more content from the cards, so to try and give you some real meaning behind these. So the team that you're thinking of, are they a team that try to please? So that's at the lower end of the scale. Do they try and stay under the radar? They don't disrupt, they don't question, they don't challenge. Do they hold back from raising concerns or call things out that they disagree with? So they don't want to create the uncomfortable moments, and they just want to create a sense of easy, positive, an easy, positive feeling. Or are the team that you're thinking about, are they courageous? Do they face up to challenges and difficult situations? Are they bold in the face of difficulty? Are they prepared to take risks, and do they challenge behavior? Do they strive to find ways to better themselves and each other by calling things out? So write down one or two, one or other of those, and then a number from 1 to 10. 10 being courageous, 1 being want to please. And over to Tina.
Okay, so now we're looking at whether the team that you're thinking of is a team that's more likely to go for consistency, where they're much more selective in terms of who they're going to bring into the team, quite protective of, you know, this is the way we do things here, that real status quo, and perhaps not seeing the value in having people who are more cognitively diverse and look at things differently, and actually going for, yeah, we like it the way it is, so let's just keep it that way. So that's your seek consistency side. The other end, of course, is the complete opposite, where you'll have a team that's much more up for embracing diversity, being open-minded, you know, really wanting to encourage people to be voicing their opinions and being curious and wanting to value that cognitive diversity in the team and make the most of it. So encouraging colleagues from different teams to come and join as well and share their thoughts too. So that whole curiosity element there as well, but truly embracing. And again, it's give a rating of 1 to 10. So if it's more over to the seek consistency side, it'd be the lower numbers, higher numbers for embrace diversity.
Thank you, Tina. So let's move on to the next one, which is about whether the team defer to leadership. So do they escalate decisions up the chain of command and look to the senior people in the team to make the decisions? Do they respect authority and prefer to accept a leader's opinion even if they disagree? And we've got some amazing organization examples. For example, the power generation company RWE, who spent $10 billion on building a traditional power generation facility, and the employees of that organization didn't challenge because they deferred to authority, even though they believed that a renewables power station would have been a better option and the right option. Or the team you're thinking about, are they inclusive? Do they give everybody a voice? Do they create a sense that everybody should be part of that decision? So it's an inclusive decision that everybody is part of and that they don't defer to leadership. So again, 1 score 1 to 10.
Okay, and now we have teams' approach to failure. Are they the sort of team that will do their utmost to avoid failure? So that whole not wanting to report on mistakes because they're worried about actually being blamed and shamed as a result of it. So fear of recrimination on that one. Do they not feel safe to fail, and they're concerned about that because they know what might actually happen? Are they more likely to just talk about the good news and hide any bad news? And so that's the side. If it is around that, it's about avoiding failure. On the other side, of course, it's that whole learning approach much more. So learning from mistakes, actually being transparent, being open, being honest if they have made mistakes, and seeing that that's a good thing, seeing that actually taking that opportunity to reflect and learn from a mistake is an opportunity for development. So where there is that time taken to reflect, to learn from others, and to reframe failure in a positive way as a learning opportunity. So again, it's pick a figure from 1 to 10 and rate your team on that, depending on where you think it is.
Thank you very much. And next one is purpose. So teams that are psychologically safe, they have purpose, they have clarity, they understand why they exist and what they're there to do. Teams that lack psychological safety require purpose. There's too much complexity, there's too much volume, and they're not quite sure of the roles that everybody plays in that team. And it is pretty much the foundation. So again, if you wouldn't mind rating yourself from 1 to 10, or sorry, the team from 1 to 10.
Okay, and this one is quite an interesting one, because there's one team that I've been working with recently, and it was such a lovely team, and they all rated themselves as 1 or 2 on this because they know that they are nice all the time, and it is a lovely team to be part of. But the problem was that there was that real avoidance of having those difficult conversations, and that kind of, oh no, we only talk about the nice things here. We don't like to be rude to anyone. We're deferential, we're agreeable. We like to please our colleagues, yeah, and want people to be happy. So they will only say what they think will make other people happy. So that's a real sort of risk factor there of a team being too nice. In contrast, at the other end, you've got teams that are much more candid and honest, and that they won't avoid having those difficult conversations. If something needs to be said, they will do it. So they won't skirt around the difficult messages, as it says on the slide there. So being more upfront, honest, and it's not avoiding those silos, and really encouraging people to be open and to share, to be outspoken. And it's that need to be honest that's coming across there. So again, choose a number and rate your team.
Thank you, Tina. Last one for me, which is about the relentlessness. And we're seeing this a lot in organizations at the moment with the Zoom world that we live in, which is back-to-back meetings. So teams that are not safe, they're relentless. Their expectations are unrealistic. They require people to be present constantly without any thinking time. And they have such an extreme desire to achieve results that nothing's good enough. Whereas teams that feel safe appreciate each other. They thank each other, they share credit when it's due, and they support each other, and both personally and professionally. So what we'd love you to do is to rate that team in terms of the extent to which they were relentless or appreciative.
Okay, and trust. And as Amanda highlighted before, this is a key one to be focusing on. So if your team is more cautious to trust, then it's likely within the team you're going to be seeing people who are pretty guarded and unlikely to open up or share concerns. They'll probably try to take the spotlight away from them. They don't like to be singled out. And I quite like the phrase that's staying below the radar. So not wanting to put their head above the pulpit, as it were, to then approach things in that way and come out there so that there might be a risk to them. In contrast, when you have teams that really do trust each other, you have that element of respect there, where people will be respecting their teammates' intentions, believing their actions to be honourable. And there's that whole sense of group ownership and group accountability as well. And it's really looking at, well, what is the solution, rather than pointing a finger of blame at people, and feeling safe with each other and believing that the intentions of your team are always good. So hopefully that gives you a nice flavour of this one. And again, and this is the final one, where you're being asked to then rate from 1 to 10 on that particular scale.
Lovely, thank you. So I'm now going to pass over to Cleme, and the purpose of this is for us to identify the top risks and then the top strengths. So you've been writing down numbers. So I'd like you to just reflect while Cleme's setting up a poll and work out, what would you say are the greatest risks of that team, because the numbers will help, because they'll be the low numbers, and the greatest strengths, because they'll be the high numbers. So Cleme, over to you.
Thanks, Amanda. So we're going to use Mentee again. So if you can click on that same link that I popped in the chat box, so I can pop it in there again, if that's helpful. And I'm just going to share my screen, but those will all be written on my mentee slide as well. So just looking here for your team's top 3 safety risks. I'll give it another minute or so for people to put in all their answers. So we've got defer to leadership out at the top there with 5. We've also got want to please. That's, I think, very, very British of us. Everyone always wants to please. Nice all the time, a bit of that artificial harmony popping up. Anything you want to say on these responses, guys?
Thank you. I'm not surprised. I was going to say is my response. Then the work that we're doing, we're seeing, even though every team and every organisation we work with is different, we are seeing a real prevalence of the nice risk, and people not wanting to upend the apple cart, wanting to stay under the radar. So the nice issue is one we are definitely seeing. And we are seeing the deferring to leadership as well. So they're 2 areas that we really are seeing. And Terence, I've noticed you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I just thought it would be interesting just on the nice all the time. We're doing some work at the moment with our kind of senior exec team. And I think one of the things, and they'd acknowledge this, that doesn't make them as effective as they could be, is that they don't challenge each other. They see they're such a unified group, but they don't challenge each other, and they're nice to each other all the time, and they reach consensus all the time. That I don't think they would see this themselves, but others see it too, that they seem quite impenetrable, and I don't think. And that's one of the things they're trying to change at the moment. So I just thought it'd be a useful example.
And because I know your exec, Terence, one of the things that's quite interesting is that your Vice Chancellor is incredibly well respected and knowledgeable and revered almost. And so I would suggest there's a bit of deferring to leadership even within her exec, which is an interesting one. So, which is why, but there is definitely a sense of people wanting to please her and please. And because it's such a meaningful organisation you work for with such purpose, I think everyone wants to do the best they can. So I'm seeing it quite a lot with with public sector or charitable status organisations. We're seeing a real sense of them wanting to do the right thing, and that being a real driver, which means that they don't necessarily challenge as much. So Joanna, you've got your hand up as well.
I wanted to ask about the nice all the time. Is that something that you guys have recognized? Is it always like this, or is there something about the hybrid workplace? And then also with that, is it something, do you think that there's so much rubbish and horrible times going on that people don't have the resilience to make things unpleasant? Or is that standard? Is it always like this? There's a kind of post-pandemic, I guess, was my. It's
a great question. The organisations that I'm working with that have got this as their greatest risk are culturally, and the climate of the organisations are just that they're nice places to work. And I'm thinking about a government organisation that they are genuine. They all completely believe in the purpose. They've massively connected to the purpose. They really want to please. They're about keeping people and homes safe. And so that absolutely drives them. But they go into meetings all very much about finding positive solutions. So they have lots of biases that are there actually about how they sort information and how they work together. So I don't necessarily think it's due to the hybrid environment, but I do think people are trying harder, I would say. With my experience of people at the moment, I think people are trying harder to be more inclusive and to be more thoughtful of their colleagues and their needs. And I know we're talking to organisations that recognise that they've done a great deal. They've done a lot over the last year to show their care and their interest in employees and their mental health. And they've got to do a really good job at not going completely backwards in saying, right, and now everyone back into work, because they could undo all their good work that they've done over the last year. So thank you. Cleme, may you go on to the next one, please?
Yep.
So Cleme's now asking you the question. So with the safety, what are the safety strengths? So these are the high scores rather than the low scores. What were the safety strengths from you? If you could select your top 3 again. I haven't seen any. Is it working okay? If I'm managing to use
Should be
it.
working,
Oh, yeah, there we are. And I have impatience on our resilience questionnaire, just so you know. Okay, brilliant. We're starting to see some good data there. So top safety strengths, brilliant, personally connected. So people are taking the time to get to know each other as humans, as people, rather than just as work colleagues, which is brilliant, which, as we would expect, is having an impact on trust. So trust is also high. That's great news, because they're the 2 foundations of psychological safety. What are we not seeing so much is being courageous, challenging each other, questioning each other. We're not seeing so much people being candid and honest, or learning from mistakes, or embracing diversity. And I speak quite a lot about cognitive diversity, so the diversity of thinking rather than biographical or identity-based diversity, which is about gender, age, race, and sexual orientation, for example. So very interesting. And how interesting, the 3 which I pointed out to be the most fundamental are the 3 highest. Thank you. Any comments from anybody? Anyone like to raise their hand? Right, thank you, Cleme. I'm conscious of time, so I think what we'll do is we'll carry on. We may not have time for a breakout group exercises, so what we might do is, if with Tina's and Cleme's permission, we'll turn it into a group discussion instead, if that's okay. So I don't think we're going to have time to do breakout with the last 15 minutes. I'll just share my screen again. So what we've done is we've taken you through the aspects of psychological safety from our research. We've worked with multiple organisations around the world, and we've got data from now thousands of individuals and teams. I don't want to say hundreds of teams, but multiple teams, and to help us understand what the themes are. And what's really interesting about the research I pointed to is that resilience of leaders is an indication of psychological safety. So leaders that feel emotionally stable and resilient are more likely to create a climate of safety in that team. And we've also found that there's a relationship between strengths or cognitive diversity and psychological safety. So teams that are more diverse in terms of the strengths of the individuals that make up that team, they're more likely to feel safe. And so what's really interesting about this is that we can create psychological safety through using other means. I'm going to pass to Tina now.
Yeah, so some suggestions that have been presented here on this slide. One of the key ones there is about that whole challenging your assumptions. And I think that's particularly relevant when you think about the pandemic that we've been going through and now moving into as well, the whole hybrid setup, because not just assuming that everyone's experience has been the same as yours, for example, and not assuming that, particularly if the culture that you're operating in is a very nice culture, just actually assuming when people say, yeah, everything's fine, actually, is it? So it's taking that opportunity to really question further, to play devil's advocate and so on. I do like that one as well, the whole asking why and really probing to understand things a bit more. So that will hopefully be creating more of a psychologically safe environment for your team. And not just focusing really inward, it's the outward. So really thinking about the wider consequences and really considering what might the implications be for the business. For example, particularly if people aren't speaking up when they should and they could and should be. So it's really thinking about those types of things, and hopefully that will then be helpful in relation to creating a more psychologically safe environment for your team. But we were really keen as well to hear from you. And I agree, Amanda, unfortunately with timing, going into a breakout room for another 10 minutes would mean that would be then the end. But it'd be useful to hear. And if people are happy to unmute, or I think, Cleme, we might also have we've got it set up, haven't we, for a mentee again. So people could type in there as well, whatever your preference. But what we're keen to hear is, what additional concrete steps do you think could be taken to really build psychological safety in a hybrid working environment? So we talked about the challenges. What specific ideas have you got? And a few people already have shared some thoughts on that. So it'd be great to hear. Yeah, Tamron, I can see that you've got your hand up there. Please do unmute and share.
It was from our breakout group discussion. We were talking about how different skill levels on the technology can have quite an impact on people joining, and it sort of exacerbates the personality in some ways. If they're someone who's likely to be frustrated and people are saying you're on mute, they're going to get more frustrated, or if they're likely to feel anxious or uncomfortable about making a mistake, then so we were talking about, wouldn't it be quite an interesting world we lived in if for every less session we had, we spent a little time at the beginning just talking about the etiquette of how everyone was going to use the tools, whether they might raise their hand or not. One of us in our group was sharing that they have rarely experienced that, and it just made me think, wow, what if we were to be quite proactive, and if it wasn't done automatically without judgment, to say, can we take a few minutes just to talk about how the technology works here and how we're going to run this session?
Nice.
So that would really have an impact, I think. And it could be under the guise of, with flexible working, let's just take some time to do that.
And I think that's such an important point as well, because especially when you've got some people on screen and some people physically in the room. Yeah, thanks for that, Tamron. And Claire, you've got your hand raised as well. We've kind of got our own etiquette going now, haven't we? So yeah, please do unmute yourself.
So just building on Tamron's point about etiquettes, I think there needs to be some kind of new team agreement setting of some kind, where people are, you know, committing to a different way of being with each other. So they might sort of flesh out exactly the different scenarios that they're going to need to work with each other in, and then come up with perhaps a list of things that they're going to commit to doing to ensure that that's the most effective and efficient way they can do something. Yeah, they can revisit and, you know, edit along the way.
Yeah, and I really like that idea, and it is as well about, you're testing it out, aren't you, like you're saying? So see, how is that working? Is there something else that we could be doing? Let's learn from that. So yeah, really emulating that learning from mistakes, because it's not going to go smoothly all the time, is it? So it's that whole learning and being open to feedback on it. Thank you for that, Claire. Anyone else got thoughts they'd like to share? Any other ideas on things that you can be doing? I know that with one of the groups that I'm working with at the moment, they're trying to get that sense of personal connection much more in relation to, rather than just going straight into a meeting, actually ensuring that the meeting itself will start, say, 10 minutes beforehand, And it's that opportunity when, if you are in the office, you'd normally be going, making a cup of coffee, having a chat, like Cleme was explaining with her example before, but actually doing it. So rather than you've got the people in the office going off and making the coffee there, they've already grabbed their coffee, but they come into the meeting room early. And then people who want to join early are on the screen, and you just have a general chit chat about whether it's the football, but we don't want to talk about that, of course, but whatever it might be, but and have that general chit chat, get to know what other people have been up to and so on before you start the actual proper agenda items that you're going to go through. So that's one thought as well. And that seems to be working with one group that I'm working with at the moment. So any other thoughts at all?
And I just had one.
I can see you're there ready.
And I'm ready.
Yeah,
so
I've got one.
I was just going to explain that a client who, I think I said this in the room rather than the main room, they have been running big meetings, and they had 8 people in a meeting room, and then they had some people on the screen who were remote. And what they found is that with everybody sitting with their laptops in front of them, they started by looking at the screen and talking to their remote colleagues who are on there. And they gradually started moving back to looking at their own screens and literally with their own headphones. And so what they found is that actually that was, even though they wanted to be in the room together, they actually found that that was good. So they did a lot of the kind of pre-meet, but then they all spoke to the screen. And that's what they've done now as their policy. But even if you're in the same meeting room or in the same location, you still speak to the screen, because that MD has said what he likes about Zoom is that everyone has the same size box. It doesn't matter how senior you are or your gender, everybody has an equal size box, and he particularly likes that.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of timing, we've just got a few more minutes left really. So does anyone have a last comment before I've just got some information to share? Because I know a few people were indicating in chat that they liked the cards and everything. And so I was going to say something about this assessment. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I got trained in this in February, and at the moment Zircon Talent are very generously still offering free training in their various tools. And clearly, not surprisingly, there's like a list of criteria that you need to meet. But if, for example, you have your own teams and you're thinking, oh, I could use that with my team, which I would really recommend. It gets you straight into the detail and really starts to get people talking about psychological safety as well. So if you're in that situation, then you may well want to go onto their website and sign up. But also if you're a consultant like I am and going into different organizations, psych safety is really big at the moment, and clients seem to really welcome that opportunity to have an assessment that can be done and then that can be used. So there's various things you can obviously do afterwards to try and encourage not just the leader of the team to create that sense of psychological safety, but everyone within the team to take it on board and to really ensure that everyone there feels psychologically safe. So I think that, we've got the, yes, so you can see there's at the bottom of that slide, we've got that, but I think Cleme, have you put it in chat as well, or Cleme's kind of going to put it into chat as well?
Drop it in now,
so
yeah.
Oh, you're doing it now, brilliant. So I suppose it's just wrapping up now, unless anyone has any final questions. I'm guessing everyone's probably got another meeting to start at past, wherever you are in the world. I noticed we did have someone in California.
Bless you.
They might be going and getting breakfast.
Yes, indeed. And thank you, Tamara.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Actually, I have felt quite safe through this environment for us to speak up. I enjoyed the group discussions as well. And I hope that we've shared something that's useful, that you get meaning from, that you can take away back to your organizations or to your clients that you can use. So
yeah, absolutely. And I noticed that in the chat as well, someone was asking about how they can get hold of those cards. And I think Amanda did just reply. So I don't know if people have been monitoring chat yourselves as well, but you can buy them either from Amazon or direct from, and I think it's slightly cheaper, isn't it, Amanda, if they buy them direct from you. So you can do it that way and they'll still get delivered for you. So that's how I did it, through directly through Zircon Talent. So Yeah. And they're a bargain at what, £25, is it?
They are bargain. All the thinking and writing that goes in there.
Yeah. And very pretty, which is also something I like.
Well, actually, I suppose that's a nice way to close it, actually, which is the rainbow theme was pretty much due to, we built this product last year with the whole NHS and the rainbow theme, and also because it's supposed to be quite an inclusive tool and with the pride flag. So that's why we chose the rainbow as our theme for our cards for this one. So
yeah, it's a nice touch. Yeah. So thank you very much from me as well. Really enjoyed it today, and hope you found it useful. And thanks to Cleme and to Amanda. It's been fun working with you both.
Thank you everybody for today.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks everyone.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Cheers now.
Thanks everyone.
Okay, bye.